Hey guys, how we doing? Today is June 17th and we're back to work on the F20. I can't remember what episode this is, but essentially today I've already started a little bit, but I'm going to work on cleaning up the flywheel here, and it's already looking pretty good. You know, I polished the surface here. There's some pitting, but it's not a huge deal. Basically I used my angle grinder, 4-inch angle grinder with a wire brush cone on it, and then I also used a die grinder to polish this up, and I cleaned up the mating surface where the pressure plate bolts to the flywheel. You know, got as much crap out of there as I could, and everything seems to be rotating really well. So I think I'm just going to leave this part of it together. I also cleaned up the pressure plate assembly that I bought from a gentleman I met on Craigslist. So this one's all freed up. The pressure plate is good and clean. He had a used clutch disc as well that I picked up from him. So that's the plan with that. I'm not going to be able to put the clutch together on this because I need to pull the pilot bearing out of the end of the crankshaft here, because it's obviously pretty in need of repair, but I've got lots of parts coming this next week for this thing. So today I'm almost done with this flywheel. It's about as good as I'm going to get it. Whoops, sorry. About as good as I'm going to get it here. But today my plan is I want to hone the cylinders out and get those good and clean, and then from there I'm going to install the pistons and rods and get them all shimmed correctly for this crank. Oh, I got to polish the crank journal, the rod journals on the crank as well. But I'm going to get all of the pistons here installed after I get the rod bearings adjusted. So that's kind of the plan of attack for today. I'll get the motor set back in the frame once the pistons are in it, or probably prior to putting the pistons in it actually, which means I got to pull this motor off and put it on something, whether it's the motorcycle jack that I had it on before or a couple pieces of timber. That's gonna have to come off. So that's that, and also the rear wheels on the other F20, I'm going to pull those off and weld up the small rust holes that are in them, because I've got a friend who works at a tire shop who is willing to get some tubes for me and mount the tires that I originally got for the M, those 13.6 38s that I paid $100 for. I'll mount them on the other set of rims and put those rims on this tractor just to get me by. So that's where we're sitting. And as far as front tires go, it looks like these ones are still holding plenty of air. So let me get this motor off the frame and get this one set back in the frame so that we can start going on the pistons. Alright guys, well, we've got the engine back in the frame, but I've still got to pull the pilot bearing out of the end of the crankshaft, and I've started honing a couple of cylinders, and I'm not sure if you guys, let me set this drill down here. I'm not sure if you guys can see how shiny it is, but they are cleaning up very, very well. So this one looks really good, and this was actually probably the worst of all of them. and there's not much of a ridge really at the top, which is good. So can't really see anything for pitting. So I'm gonna try to clamp this thing up here and get a decent view as we home. Alright guys, well, we've pretty much got them all honed. They look really good for having all that rust in them. So there's no pitting, and they cleaned up really well. Really nice cross hatching in there. So from here, what I'm going to do, I think, is I'll clean the top of this. It's pretty filthy, so I'll either use a wire wheel or maybe a die grinder, clean it up as best I can, and then we'll go underneath and I'll polish up the rod journals with some emery cloth, and from there we'll put the pistons in and we'll be one step closer. So let me grab a die grinder here, and we'll get to work on cleaning up. Alright guys, basically what I did here is I took a piece of emery cloth. I should actually have a piece that's a little bit longer, but what we want to do is try to polish up these journals as best we can. So basically just wrap it around and go back and forth. And you try to go side to side as well as around. Alright guys, well, we've got them pretty well polished. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of imperfections in the crank anymore. So there's a couple little areas, but I'm pretty satisfied with how it's turned out. And as you can see, the bearings are turning beautifully. So the camshaft and the lifters are moving beautifully. So from here, we're just going to adjust the bearings on the piston rods. And basically I'm going to do it, instead of using plastic gauge, a lot of guys use plastic gauge. I'm going to do it the same way I did it on my John Deere A, because that has Babbitt style bearings as well. Basically what's going to happen is I'm going to put all the shims on that I've got, well, within respect to you know, the clearance on here. It'll be easier to explain once I get going on it, but basically I'll tighten the rods down on each journal, and then at which point that the rod clamps down on the journal of the crankshaft and won't turn, I'll add one shim or one pair of shims to that rod, and that should give me enough clearance for oil. It should be about 2 to 3 thousandths or so. So that's, as we go along, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. But let me get everything set up here, and we'll go start on that. All right, guys. So basically, I actually got kind of lucky on this rod here, but there's a shim pack in between the rod bearing cap and the rod itself, and basically you want to adjust the, I guess you could say, the tension or the amount of clearance you have between the rod and the crank by adding or removing shims from this shim pack. And the way that I typically do it is I will put all the shims that I can, or however many shims were on here when I took it apart. I'll put that many shims on and tighten everything down. And basically, when you do that, you should have plenty of clearance from when you took it apart to when you put it back together. If you put the same amount of shims on here that were on here when you took it apart, there should be plenty of clearance. So then what you want to do is remove shims, one from each side, and retorque it and see where your clearances are at. But essentially, I'll remove a shim from each side, retorque it, and then if I can't move the rod on the crank, at that point I know to add one shim to each side, and that should give me enough clearance to have enough oil flow in the journal here. So as you can see, this is tightened down. I can't really move it. A little bit I can move it, but it's turning with the crank. So what I'll do is I'll take the nuts off, pull the cap off, and then add one shim to each side. Okay? So I'll do that. And the rod bearings on this, from what I found online, there are no torque specs in the manual, so you'll want to go to about 50 foot-pounds. Get the other side here, get it loosened up. So you see how that's loosened up now that I've loosened the nuts for the rod bearing cap. So basically, pull the nuts off here. So I'm going to need the wrench. You want to be careful that you don't lose the shims that you had, like I just did. So before I lose any more shims here, This would probably be a lot easier with the motor tipped on its side. So, just so you're aware, on each side of the shim pack there's a thick shim plate, and then your shims are very thin, almost like exaggerated tin foil, but they're just very thin wafer-like shims. So when you put your rods together, it'll go the thick shim plate, and then you put all of your thin shims between, and then there's another thick shim plate that goes on there. So right now I'm just going to add one shim to each side, and then I'll tighten it back down and go from there. And after I do this first one, I will I'll set the next three up with the same amount of shims, because they should be similar. You know, they should all wear similarly. So I've added a shim to each side. I'll grab my cap. And you got to be careful when you put these together so that you don't let go of the studs, because then your studs will fall out of your rods, or I should say your rod bolts rather, will fall out of your rods, and then you'll lose all your shims. So now that I got that one on, I can let it hang and put the other one on here. So there's one, just snugged up. So there should be plenty of clearance there. We'll snug it up just a little bit. Now obviously I don't have the torque wrench on here, but kind of get a feel for it. It should be pretty close. But now now it turns pretty freely on there. Actually, I could probably add another shim to each side. So I'll add one more shim on here and then go from there. That should get you fairly close. You know, a lot of guys like to use plastic gauge and do it that way, and that's fine. But for me, this seems to work fairly well. So my John Deere A, this is how I did it, and I've got very good oil pressure, and the bearings are still in good shape. You know, the last time I had the crankcase cover off, I checked them. You know, I pulled the rod bearing cap off, and looked at the condition of the bearings, and everything looked to be okay. So now I'll just work them out of here, just like that. Grab a couple more of these shims from my shim pack. And now I'm gonna count the thin shims to see how many are in here, and then I'll start with that number on each of the following rods. So it's kind of a time-consuming process, but once you get it, it's good to go. So all right guys, well, we did get the pistons in that other one, but as you can see, I've also taken the wheels off of the 35, the flat spokes, and I put the round spoke F&H on here because I've got the tires for those 38-inch flat spokes that I'm going to have put on. So that's where we're sitting with that. And yeah, we're going to go put this away and then start welding up holes in the rims for the flat spokes, and we'll give you a glimpse of the pistons installed. Alright guys, so as I said before, sorry I bounced around quite a bit, but got the pistons in, everything's set. I still have to torque the rod bearings, but I'll do that next time I'm here. But as you can see, everything's moving pretty well. Let me see if I can grab it from the pulley here. I've got a good bit of oil in all the cylinders, on the rod bearings, on the main bearings, so none of that stuff's going to rust. Got my pressure plate hanging up there. Also, I've got one of the tires off of the flat spokes, and we got to do some rim repair here. Got to cut out this section here with the rust holes. Got a couple rust holes here and here. So we'll have to cut those out and weld them shut. I've already started making my patches for this area. So slowly but surely we're getting there. A friend of mine works at a tire shop, and he's going to help me with the mounting of the new tires. I'm going to probably have to take an air chisel and chisel off this bead that's left on here. So a little bit of work, but right now we're pretty much just waiting on parts for the motor, and I still have to get the pilot bearing out. Didn't get to that today, but the main thing is we've got all the cylinders honed, the pistons in, the rod bearings set up. So that was kind of the main goal. And we got the rear wheels swapped out on the other F20. Got them off of this one. So progress, quite a bit of progress. I apologize for not getting as much of it on video today, but I was just kind of in a working mood and wasn't really paying attention to the camera. But this is, and that's my fault, but this is kind of where we're stuck here, making patches for the rims, getting that pilot bearing out, and then waiting on parts. So that's where we're sitting. And I would anticipate that I probably won't get this video edited until tomorrow, which is Sunday. But yeah, doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. And my friend Domino is building a hot rod wheelbarrow. Or I'm sorry, not a hot rod wheelbarrow, a hot rod wagon that's made out of a wheelbarrow and a wagon. So he's working on building the frame for it right now, and from there he'll make his wagon for his kids. And I think it's supposed to be similar to like a Ford coupe or T-bucket or something back. I can't remember. I'm not very savvy on the older hot rods, but an older hot rod based coupe. So that's where that's going to be, or that's what that is going to be. But anyways, I suppose I could try and fire up the M and just move it, so at least you guys get some tractor time today. my strap here. Well, that's going to conclude this episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And thanks for wrenching with me. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.